Hey boys and girls, it's Mr. Mac from the Harker School with another fun-filled video. Today we're going to be adding fractions with unlike denominators. So essentially the denominator is going to be different and we're going to have to figure out what to do in order to add and subtract them. If you watched the video earlier of comparing fractions with an unlike denominator, then this video is going to be very similar to that because you're going to follow all of the same steps that you followed for comparing fractions with unlike denominators. But then at the end, instead of comparing the numerators, you're going to be adding and subtracting those numerators. Okay, so let's jump right into it today with example number 1. It says, in the morning, an octopus swam for 1/3 hour. In the afternoon, the octopus swam for 1/4 hour. For how much time of 1 hour did the octopus swim all together? So we're going to be adding 1/3 and 1/4. In order to add them, you need to find a common denominator, all right? So in the past, we've used the least common multiple to find the common denominator. You could do that, or you could just simply find a common multiple. All right, but then you might have to simplify as well. All right, so if we take a look at 1/3 and 1/4, let's say we were looking for the common denominator for 3 and 4. 3, 6, 9, and 12. 4, 8, 12. Here is our common denominator of 12. So what you see here is they tell you that the least common denominator is 12. So now we need to take 1/3 and 1/4, and we need to get them to have a denominator of 12. So just as to show it in another way, I like to put them right next to each other and say, how do you get from 3 to 12? Multiply it by 4. So you got to multiply by 4 here to give you 4/12. Okay, and then for 1/4. Okay, you need to have a denominator again of 12. Well, how did you get from 4 to 12? You multiplied it by 3. So then you multiply the numerator by 3. Now you're adding these fractions. Well, again, when you're adding fractions that have a common denominator, your denominator is going to stay the same and you're adding the numerators. So 4 plus 3 is going to give you 7. And then your denominator is going to stay as 12. So your answer here is going to be 7/12. As I've said before in previous videos, if you've watched them, I love using fraction pieces to understand this. So when we look down here, it says 1/3 plus 1/4. They show 1/3 and 1/4 right here. Now, when we combine them, if I look at 1/3 and 1/4 next to each other, there's nothing I can say to tell what the total amount is there. It just looks like two fraction pieces that are together. When we find that common denominator, we say, okay, I see that 1/3 is right here, and that's equal to 4/12, and 1/4 is right here, and that's equal to 3/12. So I have 7/12 total. 7 of these 1/12 pieces. Okay, that's the biggest thing for me when I'm looking at these models to help me to understand it. Because just adding 1/3 and 1/4 to give me 7/12 seems very crazy. But when I look at the models, it really does make sense as to why we make an equivalent fraction to add them together, because you can only add and subtract things that are the same, right? If I had $6 and you asked me for 2 apples, I can't do it. Right, but if I had $6, you asked me for $2, I could give you $2. If I had 6 apples and you asked for 2 apples, I could give you 2 apples. So in these fraction examples, when we're adding and subtracting, you have to think of it that way. You have to make sure your denominator is the same before you do anything. All right, so I'm going to erase this page and I'm going to move us on to another example, which is right here. Okay, so it says, Catalina spent 1/5 of her free time reading and 7/10 of her free time practicing the flute. What fraction of her free time did she spend reading and practicing the flute? So again, we have 1/5 and 7/10. So we have 1/5 and we're adding 7/10. All right, we have to find our common denominator, which they show here is 10. Now, 7/10, we already have a denominator of 10, so don't do anything to it. So what am I going to do to this one? I multiply this by 2, I multiply the numerator by 2, and that gives me 2/10. So 2/10 plus 7/10 equals 9/10. So that means that we spent 9/10 of our time there either reading or practicing the flute. Now, when they ask you to check and estimate, well, 1/5 is kind of close to 0. It's really close to not being anything. And 7/10 is close to 1. So if we did 0 plus 1, that would give me about 1. And 9/10 is really close to having 1 whole. So our check kind of comes through and shows us that our answer is reasonable. Now, does your answer mean that does your estimate mean that your answer is 100% correct? It doesn't mean that, but it means that it's reasonable, right? It could be correct. That's going to be helpful when you start dealing with some bigger numbers and some bigger fractions, because the estimate about what it's going to be is going to make sure that you're in the right ballpark. You're right around where you need to be. All right. So down here for guided practice, you can try those. I'm going to move on to the next page for the adding of the unlike denominators, because that'll give us a little bit more space to work. So here we are. So again, biggest thing, find the common denominator, right? 3 and 5. So if I wanted to list those, 3 and 5, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and then 5, 10, 15. Okay, I know that those are my common denominators. So now I'm creating my equivalent fractions with 15 as my denominator. Okay, 3 times 5 is 15, so I multiply the numerator by 5. 5 times 3 is 15, so I multiply this numerator by 3. And then I'm adding them here. 5 plus 3 is 8. And your denominator always stays the same, because if you had 5 15ths and then you got 3 more 15ths, how many total 15ths do you have? That's the way you need to think about it. A lot of times people try to say, well, I need to add 15 and 15. No, absolutely not. You have 5 of the 15ths, 3 of the 15ths gives you 8 of those 15ths. All right, let's try this next problem here. I'll put a little bar here to give us some space. 2 and 5. We've done a problem with 2 and 5 as the denominator already. Our common denominator is going to be 10. All right, so 10 here and 10 here. So 2 times 5. So I multiply the numerator by 5. 5 times 2. I have to multiply the numerator by 2. 5 plus 2 is 7, and the denominator stays the same. We're going to try one more problem here, all right? And then we're going to do a couple on our own to see if we understand the concept. So we have 12 and 4. Remember, when the denominators, when 4 is a factor of 12, 4 can go into 12. So just use 12 as the denominator. Okay, I multiply 4 by 3, so I multiply the numerator by 3. That gives me 5 plus 3, is 8. And then the denominator is 12. Now, we did a video before of finding the simplest form. So if you did not watch that video yet, I would go back and watch that video now or after we're done here, just to get an idea. But when we're doing simplest form, remember, you're dividing the numerator and the denominator by the same numbers, okay? 8 and 12 can both be divided by 4, so that's going to give me 2/3 as my answer, okay? If you're saying 8/12 is the answer, it's not wrong, but it's not completely correct. We want to find simplest form, because that's what it says here in our directions. All right. These problems can be a little long, so I'm going to have us just work on numbers 6 and 7 right now. All right. So you're going to pause your video and work on 6 and 7, and then I will go over them. So go ahead and give it a pause. And when we come back from our pause, we say 3 and 6, the common denominator. 3 can go into 6, so let's make 6 our denominator. All right, so 3 times 2 was 6, so multiply there. We get 4 plus 1 is 5, and the denominator stays as 6. All right, and then 2 can go into 4, so let's make 4 our denominator. 2 times 2 is 4. Multiply the numerator by 2. 2/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to stop the adding here. You can continue to do these and check them out on your own. I'm going to erase this page, and I'm actually going to jump forward to a new page for subtraction. because we did the adding, we didn't want to look at some of the subtraction problems, okay, I'm going to take us right to the page where we're going to be doing the work, because for subtraction, it is the same types of steps as the addition, right? You're still finding a common denominator, you're still making equivalent fractions, and then instead of adding your numerators, you're just subtracting. Okay, so I wanted to give us a couple like this just to practice, and then we can be masters of this, and we can rock and roll. All right, 6 and 2, our common denominator is going to be 6. All right, so I multiply this by 3, so I multiply the numerator by 3, and I get this. 5/6 minus 3/6 is 2/6. Now, again, simplest form. So 2 and 6 can both be divided by 2, so that's going to give me 1/3. All right, 5 and 4. If I want to find my common denominator here, 5, 10, 15, and 20. All right, 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. Right, so again, 20 is our common denominator. So we want to make two new equivalent fractions with 20 as our denominator. All right, so then 5 times 4 is 20, so I multiply 2 times 4, and that gives me 8. 4 times 5 is 20, then I multiply the numerator by 5. 8 minus 5 is 3, and the denominator is going to be 20. All right, 5 and 6 in the video earlier, we found the denominator was going to be 30. All right, so I'm going to have my common denominator be 30 times 6 times 6, that gives me 24, times 5 times 5 gives me 5. 24 minus 5 is 19, and the denominator is going to be 30. All right, I'm going to have you do one problem to practice the subtraction because we've already done the addition, but I've got to get one problem then, right? So number 5, pause the video and give it a shot, and then unpause it when you're ready. And you're on pause and ready to rock and roll. So 8 and 2, the common denominator is going to be 8 because 2 can go into 8. All right. So I multiplied the denominator by 4. I multiplied the numerator by 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. And 8 is our denominator. All right, guys. Hopefully this video helped you. If not, watch it again. Go back, watch the comparing fractions with unlike denominators or uncommon denominators. It's all the same for comparing, adding, and subtracting. Find your common denominator, make equivalent fractions, and then you're either adding, subtracting, or comparing your numerators. All right, guys, best of luck. If you need more help, there's other videos that are going to be posted. There's other links that you're going to be able to try and practice with. All right, I think you'll be fine. Take care. Thank you so much.